Shelby here. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. I'm glad you're all with me today. I'm very excited about today's video. I am doing my first ever author guide or like deep dive, whatever you want to, into an author. And I'm so excited because I absolutely love this author. I knew when I wanted to start making some author guides, I knew that this author had to be my first one that I did, just because she is my #1 favorite author ever. I love her to pieces. I love there are some books that I didn't like as much as some of the others, but overall I love all of her work. And yeah, I'm so excited to film this video. So of course, if you see the title of this video in the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about Simone. She has gotten a lot more popular recently, especially since she signed on with Bloom Books, which is they're part of like Source Books, just a publisher, so that she can have her books in like regular like bookstores. Like you can see her books at like Barnes and Noble now and all these other places, instead of just being on Amazon or being like a self-published exclusively like author. So I'm very excited for her that more people will get their hands on her works. But I know I see a lot of times like people on Facebook or Instagram asking about her works. Books are definitely not for everybody, which you're gonna know that just from any author that you read. Her books definitely work for me. They have just elements that just like they speak to me, and I just love them. But again, I know that certain parts of her writing or her writing style or some of the things that she might have in her books are not going to work for everybody. So I'm very careful with who I recommend her works to. But that being said, I still love her, and I'm excited for more people to read about her. So I decided to make this video because she just released Salt Kiss this last week, and I loved it. So I wanted to kind of make this, if you follow me on Instagram, it's kind of been a little bit of like a Simone week. I keep posting things about her. So we're going to continue that trend, and I wanted to make this author guide for her after this new release. So how this video is going to work, I'm going to go through all of her books that she has written, just kind of give like a little synopsis about them, and then we're kind of going to go into like what I like about them, or if I like them or whatnot, and then kind of talk about some of her like overarching elements that she puts in her books or certain themes that she goes over. I will also talk about, you know, why I love her, why I think she's a great author, and then I'll just kind of go into at the end what I recommend, like the reading order or where you should really start with her books. If you're new to her, I'll go over that as well. And I may end up putting like timestamps in this video just to kind of help y'all out with that if you have read some of her books, or just if you want to kind of skip around. Okay. Oh, also, before we get into all the books, I did have to represent for this video today. I am wearing my Colchester for President book, my Colchester for President t-shirt. So President Colchester is a character in one of her series that I absolutely love, so representing there. Okay, so before we get into all of her books, I do have a little note. I will not be talking about any of her like free short stories that she has on her website. She has several. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 of those. I'm not going to be talking about those. I haven't actually gotten to any of those, but I'm mostly going to be trying to stick to books that you can actually buy physical copies of, or that are like advertised on Amazon or other booksellers. I'm also not going to be talking about any books of hers that are out of print. So like I have This book here, Once Upon a Dream, this is a collection of some different short stories that she did. This is actually out of print, so I'm not going to be talking about any of these. Same with this anthology series. So a couple of her stories from these anthologies are actually like standalones that she does have on Amazon, so I will be talking about those, but the story that she wrote in this version of this anthology is not actually on is not out like by itself yet, so I'm not gonna be talking about that one. I also haven't read this one yet, so just wanted to put that out there. I'm only gonna be talking about the books that the majority of people can get to, because they're her free stories, even though they're on her website and you can absolutely go to her website. I know not everybody is going to do that, but there you go. So we're going to be starting off with what I think is probably her most well-known work, and that's going to be her Priest series. I think when you do like a search for Simone, this is probably what's going to come up. This and then her New Camelot series, which I'm going to get to next, but this one especially is probably what she is most well-known for. So this series, there are currently 3 books in this series and then 1 novella in this series. This whole series evolves around these brothers and basically where their life has taken them after the aftermath of their sister who committed suicide after she was abused, I believe sexually, if I'm remembering correctly, by a Catholic priest. Their whole family is Catholic. They grew up Catholic, and yeah, so they're kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. And this is like, this first one takes place like years later, so but it's still something that affected all of them in different ways, and kind of how their lives have taken them because of this big one pivotal moment in their life, in their family. But yeah, so Priest, the first book of the series, is actually about Tyler. He is a Catholic priest. That's where he decided his life would take him, because he wanted to kind of refute the whole stigma that was going around about like Catholic priests and some of that like potential sexual abuse, that he wanted to prove that there are still good priests within Catholicism. Yeah, so he is a priest. He has this small, very small little church in Kansas that he presides over, and one day there's this woman that comes in to his confessional, and he is instantly attracted to her, and he wants to do very, very dirty things with her. And then she keeps coming back, and she goes to church and becomes like a parishioner of his church, and he can't let that go, that he wants to do all these very, very dirty things to her. So this is very taboo, of course. There is a lot of angst to this. They do end up having very, very, very dirty, steamy scenes, spicy scenes in the church. So again, very taboo. And yeah, so also, I love this one. I love all of these. But also, if you haven't listened to the audiobook of this series, I highly, highly recommend. Jacob Morgan does the audiobook, I believe, for all of the books in this series, and his voice is just everything. I would not recommend listening to the audiobook when you're like around other people though. Like if you're at work listening to it, I would not recommend it, because wow. Like I said, there are some very, 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 very dirty scenes in this book. Then we have the novella, which takes place between Priest and the second book of the series. This is Midnight Mass. This is about our character from the first book, Tyler, and Poppy, who is his love interest, and they are now together, and they are dealing with some struggles in their relationship, and this is just them kind of working through some of those struggles. I don't think this one is completely necessary to read if you're wanting to read the pre-series. It is just kind of a little like add-on to it. I did still really enjoy this one, and I think there are some important points that Simone talks about this one. Specifically, there is like infertility, miscarriage talks in this one, so there are trigger warnings for that. So but I did really enjoy this, but I don't think it retracts. Like if you decide to skip this one, you're not really going to be missing a ton by going on to the next one, if that makes sense. Then the second book of the series is going to be Sinner. This is actually about the oldest Bell brother, Sean, and he is a Playboy character. So where Tyler immersed himself into his faith, into Catholicism, Sean did the exact opposite. He wanted to completely renounce faith. He doesn't believe in it, doesn't want anything to do with religion, with Catholicism. So he is more of a like Playboy character. He has his own business, and he gets approached by his best friend's younger sister, whom he's definitely attracted to. And she is in the process of becoming a nun, but before she takes like her final vows or whatever, she wants him to teach her the ways of sex, because she doesn't want to, once she becomes a nun, she doesn't want to have any like regrets of not like having sex. So she's going to like get this one last kind of like hurrah out of the way before she fully becomes a nun, and she wants Sean to help her with this. So this becomes their love story, and it's lots of angst again in this one. I definitely cried with this one. There's trigger warnings with death of a family member / loved one, and it's very heartbreaking. And there's just a lot of stuff that both of these characters are dealing with in this story, and it's very good. And I think this is honestly probably the most underrated out of this series. I really love this one. This one actually might be my favorite of the series, but usually, moving on to the third book of the series, Saint, usually Saint is actually people's favorite out of the series. So this is about the second to youngest brother. There's 4 brothers, and his name is Aiden, and he's also kind of dealing with this aftermath. He became a little bit more like Sean, more of like a Playboy type character, and then some things happened. He has a lot of mental health things going on that he's dealing with, and he decided to go to a monastery and become a monk. So he's in the process of fully immersing himself and becoming a monk. So this is actually a male-male romance, and this is also a second chance romance, because when he left to become a monk, he broke up with his sort of boyfriend, who happened to be the best friend of Sean. So his brother's best friend kind of romance. And so now Elijah, whom he had broken up with, is now like years later has come to this monastery where he's at in order to write this article about them, because they're like making beer. And so he's there to watch and see what they do, and he's writing this article, and they kind of rekindle some of their sparks, and they find out a little bit about more like why Aiden left and some of the mental health issues that he was dealing with and some of the trauma that he was dealing with. And yes, I understand why this one is probably people's favorites. It is a very emotional story, and it's a very beautiful story. It's a very steamy story. Again, all of Sierra Simone's works are very, very steamy. There are trigger warnings in this one, especially for like mental health and like suicide ideations. So yeah, that is going to be the pre-series. Now, there are going to be 2 new books in the pre-series at some point. There's no titles for these. I don't even think Sierra Simone was actually started writing these stories yet, but she has said that there are going to be more books in this at some point, and that is going to be with Ryan Bell, who is the youngest brother, and then another book for Father Jordan, who is another priest that pops up throughout this story. He is somebody that Tyler turns to for like advice, and several of the other people do as well, so he is going to get his own story as well. So expect at some point in the future to be that this book series will be 5 books long, with this still like the novella. I just don't know when those are going to be out. Then we get to the new Camelot series. So that is going to be American Queen, the first book of the series. Then we have American Prince, and then finally American King. So this series it's called New Camelot because this is a Camelot retelling of King Arthur, Guinevere, his wife, and Lancelot, his knight, and their infidelity. And so this is a retelling of that, but it's modern day. This is about, we have Greer, and she is being wooed by the President of the United States, President Maxon Ashley Colchester, which is where my t-shirt comes from. Ash is the president, and then he has his vice president, Embry. Why am I blanking on his name? Yes, so Embry. So she is being wooed by Ash, and she is going to end up getting married to him, but she also has had a somewhat former relationship with Embry, and she's also falling in love with Embry. So instead of this being a cheating, or like I said, like an infidelity kind of scenario, this actually turns out into being a throuple scenario. This is an MMF story. All 3 of these characters are in love with each other. And yeah, there's lots of bonkers stuff that happens in this series. Each of these books, so this first one is told exclusively through Greer's point of view, and then when we get to American Prince, we get Embry's point of view and little bits of Greer's, and then finally in American King is when we finally get Ash's point of view, and then we still get a little bit of Embry and Greer in this one. And I know some readers, I think some people can get frustrated by that, but that you don't get more of their point of view. Oh, and then back to speaking of that, back to pre-series, all of these books are told through the male protagonist's point of view, like the Bell brothers' point of view. We get nothing, like I think we get maybe like 1 chapter of Poppy, but it's all through Tyler. And then the same with this one. All of this book is through Sean's point of view. So I can see like some people getting frustrated with that, but I really appreciate that, especially in this one, because I feel like each book, once you finally get those point of views, it adds to your digging deeper into the layers of this story. So this one, like I said, it is MMF. It's a throuple. There is lots of BDSM in this one. There is elements of BDSM in the pre-series, but not as much as there is in this one. Ash is a dom, and Embry and Greer are his submissives. We also do get, I'm going to say there are sprinkles of magic in this story. It's very, very little, but it is a little bit jarring or surprising when you get to it in this series. So it is not completely a like contemporary, like realistic story. There are just little sprinkles of this magicalness. And then we have a couple of novellas that she wrote after this series was completed. Oh, there is also an HEA of this trilogy. And I know some people don't want to finish it because they're worried about it, but there is an HEA. Just trust me, it's there. You just have to suffer for it. So then she has a couple novellas that she wrote after this, one being Cards of Love, The Moon. This is about Merlin, who is a character. He is kind of like an advisory kind of figure to Ash in the New Camelot trilogy. This is his like AGA with his love interest Nimue. This one, and then American Squire, which is about Ryan Belvedere, who was the like personal assistant to Ash. And this one, he is on a mission from Merlin to grab this like book in England. So both of these books I don't think are necessary to read if you don't want to. I kind of found this one to be a little bit confusing, and we get a little bit of like more backstory like relating to the actual like original Camelot story, and then this like kind of retelling. This is actually a Merlin is the submissive in this scenario, and Nimue, his love interest, is the dominant. So I did find that kind of interesting that we have a kind of like a flip. I don't actually see that in a ton of romance where the female is actually the dominant, especially a female that is younger than the hero. She is like, she's several years younger than Merlin. I want to say like 15. It's a big age gap between them, but she is the dominant in the scenario and he is the submissive. So I did find that kind of interesting. And then this is another like male-male romance where he wants to become a service submissive to this guy that he meets at this home mansion of sorts in England. This actually does kind of tie the New Camelot series to then her Thornchapel series, but again, neither of these two are necessary to read to fully understand like the story of either the New Camelot series or the Thornchapel series, which I'm going to get to. You don't, like I said, they're not necessary if you don't want to, but you can just to kind of get like a little extra like something. So, and these, I did enjoy these. Just want to put that out there. Okay, so after the American Squire tie-in to Thornchapel, we get to her Thornchapel series, which is a 4-book series starting with A Lesson in Thorns, and then we get to Feast of Sparks. Then we have Harvest of Sighs, and then finally our last book of the series, Door of Bruises. So this series takes a little bit of a turn. This brings us to England. This is about 6 friends. They were friends when they were younger, when all of their parents had gotten together at Thornchapel, this home in England, and they were doing some mysterious things that these 6 people didn't quite know about until later on. So they're all kind of coming back together at this house. Auden, who is now has inherited the house, is wanting to do renovations on it. So he's kind of bringing all of his friends back to do these renovations. Poe, who is our point of view for this first book, she is a librarian and she is coming to Thornchapel to archive the library at Thornchapel. So with all these people coming back together at this home, they are finding out some different secrets that are going on at Thornchapel. They are starting to discover what their parents were doing when they were younger, and they were recreating these different rituals that have been kind of passed down through the generations of this kind of small town, celebrating these pagan holidays. And they decide they want to also recreate these rituals for themselves. But in doing so, they start to find out these mysterious things are going on. This is another series where there is bits of magic. There's a little bit more than the New Camelot series, but there's still like, there's little sprinkles starting, and they start to get bigger and bigger as the story progresses. So by doing these rituals, they are starting to open up and create this magic. And eventually, by doing these rituals, a door appears. And they don't know what to do with it until people in the town start getting sick. And I'm just going to leave it at that because all of this is very kinky, very smutty. All of the people in this group are bisexual. There is, at one point in this story, there is almost an orgy scene. There is also like these different pairings, like love matches. So we have an MMF throuple relationship going on. We do have a female-female relationship, and then we kind of have this guy who's just kind of this like lone wolf kind of person. Very angsty, very emotional, and yeah. Then we get to Sierra Simone's newest release, which is the Lynice, I think is how you say that, series. Starting with, she does have a prequel novella to this series, Salt in the Wound. So this, and then we have Salt Kiss, which is the first like full-length novel of this series. This is going to be a trilogy. So this series is actually an Tristan and Isolde retelling. So we have, starting with the novella, which actually, like some of the other series, she has these different novellas that you don't actually need to read for the story. I think this one is actually pretty necessary for the story. This one we get a little backstory of Isolde and Mark, and they are engaged to be married, and we get backstory of how that arrangement came about and how they met each other before we get to them in this book. They are in an arranged marriage, and this is Isolde's point of view. She doesn't really like this, that her father is making her marry this man, because she actually wants to become a nun. And she doesn't want to be with somebody. She doesn't want to be married. She feels that she is supposed to be married to God. So yeah, so we have that. And then Salt Kiss, we actually get Tristan's point of view. So Tristan is hired by Mark to be his bodyguard. Tristan is Mark's step nephew. Tristan's father ends up getting married to Mark's older sister. So he becomes his bodyguard, and in doing so, he is immersed in Mark's life, basically, is there for everything. Mark owns a BDSM club, and he is kind of the king of this club, of Lynice is what it's called. And then he finds out that he's falling in love with Mark, and then he finds out that Mark is engaged and is going to get married, and Mark sends him off to go get his bride, who is living in Ireland for a time, and he's bringing her back to America right before they get married. And he starts to fall in love with Isolde as well. So this first book of the story, we don't get as much of like a throuple, but Sierra Simone has said that this will turn into a throuple story, kind of like the New Camelot trilogy. We just don't get that yet. We do get MM scenes and then MF scenes, but we don't get anything with the three of them together. We also don't get anything with Isolde and Mark together, like sexually or anything, in this book. We get Mark and Isolde in this one. So yeah, so these are the only two books that are out currently. Like I said, this is going to be a trilogy. Honeycut is going to be the second book of this series, and this is going to be coming out sometime next year. Sierra Simone has stated that she's hoping it will be June. She wanted it to be coming out sooner, but now that she's kind of signed on with Bloom Books, she is at the mercy of this bookseller, and they need a lot more time to be able to print these books and get them out to different bookstores. So like I said, she is hoping that it would have come out sooner, but she's hoping now for June. And then number 3, maybe it'll be able to come out next year. like near the end of the year. Otherwise, it might get pushed off to 2025, which would make me so sad. This is also kind of set up again like the New Camelot series. Like I said, Isolde is the point of view that we get in this first one. Tristan is the point of view that we get in Salt Kiss. Honeycut will be Isolde's point of view again, with a little bit of Tristan sprinkled in. And then the third book of the series, we will finally get Mark's point of view, which I'm very, very excited to finally get to Mark's point of view, because he's very mysterious, dark, cruel kind of character, and I want to find out what he's thinking. But I'm gonna have to wait for that for a while. Those three series that we just talked about, I would say, is probably the big like crux of the Sierraverse, of her different world. They all take place in the same world. They all somewhat sort of interconnect together. You will hear different snippets from all of the series talking about characters from the other ones very briefly, especially in this book. Mark actually taught Ash from New Camelot how to be a dom. There's a point in here where Mark says that there are no heroes except for Max and Colchester, and it just, I love those little like snippets from the other books. So now we're gonna get to her historicals, starting off with the Markham Hall series, which starts with The Awakening of Ivy Leavold. These series are still within the Sierraverse, but they don't completely connect to the other ones, at least not yet. Except by like last name, Ivy Leavold and Mr. Markham. There is, I believe, a Markham in Thornchapel, if I'm remembering correctly. So again, this first historical, we have The Awakening of Ivy Leavold, The Education of Ivy Leavold, and then The Punishment of Ivy Leavold is the main trilogy. This is actually a Jane Eyre retelling. So we have Ivy, and her brother has passed away, and so she is taken in by her cousin's widower. That's the only person around, like family-wise, that she has that can take her in, and she becomes enamored by this gruff man, and they kind of start this like relationship. This honestly isn't my most favorite of Sierra Simone's works, but it is still very good. There are bits of BDSM in the series again. And then we move on to her London Lover series, which is kind of also a tie-in to this series. She has it as, you can either, this is either a trilogy or this is a 5-book series, depending on how you want to look at it. This 3 books is all about Ivy and Julian. And this is their like story arc. And then we have Molly, the London Lovers. So we have the seduction of Molly O'Flaherty, and then the wedding of Molly O'Flaherty. So she is a character that pops up in the original like little like 3 like book series, and then now she gets kind of her own little duet. And this is, she owns her own company, but the board members on her company are needing her to get married because they say she can't own her own company unless she is married to a man, and actually the man is going to be the one that dictates the company, which she's pissed off about, but that's kind of the rules set out in this historical kind of setting, like the society. And she is going to be getting married to a friend, but then he is not the best match for her. And we have this other friend of hers, Silas, and they like to kind of play together sometimes. And by play together, I mean that in like a sexy way. And Silas is falling in love with Molly and thinks that she should marry him in order to keep her company. So that is that series. Then we have her Far Hope stories, which are the novellas that are in some of the historical romance anthologies that she's been in, the Duke I'd Like to F and Rake I'd Like to F. So we have the Chasing of Eleanor Vane. This is about Eleanor, and she is in this like arranged marriage to this Duke's nephew, basically to kind of keep his nephew in line, and she does not like that. She's basically being a pawn to babysit this guy, and she is actually interested in the Duke. There's this age gap. Very good. I very much enjoyed the short story. This is one of the only stories of Sierra Simone's that is actually on KU. Same with the Last Crimes of Peregrine Hind. I think I'm saying that correctly. Which was in the Rake I'd Like to F anthology. This is also on KU. This is a male romance. This is about a highwayman guy who is wanting revenge against this family, and he is wanting to kill the Duke, but instead ends up capturing the Duke's younger brother and decides to use him as ransom to get his revenge against this family. I didn't like this one as much, but again, like all of Sierra Simone's books, I believe I gave 3 stars is like the lowest I've given anything, I think. So that's her historicals. Now we're going to be talking about her co-written stories. So she has 2 books co-written with Laurel Page, and then she has a couple books written with Julie Murphy. So we have Hot Cop, which is co-written with Laurel Page. This is a contemporary romance, borderline rom-com about this girl. She's a librarian. She really wants to have a baby. That is just what she wants. She's always wanted to have a baby and be a mother, and she is starting to feel like her biological clock is ticking. She ends up running into this cop, very hot. That's the whole Hot Cop name of the story. And he likes her. I think he is a little bit of a playboy kind of character. They go on a date and she proposes this deal. She's like, hey, you would have good genes for my baby that I want. So let's make a deal for you to impregnate me, and you can be involved if you want or not. And he goes along with it. He's like, yeah, I'll make a baby with you. So that's why I kind of say it's kind of like borderline a rom-com, because it is kind of hilarious, like the scenario that this happens. But I love this one. Definite breeding kink in here. This is very steamy. There is sexy scenes in a library, in a cop car, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Then we also have Porn Star co-written with Laurel Page. So this, as the name suggests, is about a porn star, Logan. And he's a very famous porn star, and he is deciding to get with this other porn star, Debbie, and he is wanting to create something new within the porn industry. He is kind of wanting to create almost like a series of on the website, a web series, if I can get my brain to work. And it's almost like a kind of like reality TV, but make it porn. And he's wanting to create this with Debbie, and they're creating this scenario of them dating and falling in love, but it's porn. And in doing so, in reality, Logan is starting to fall in love with Debbie. And so they're kind of trying to figure out what is real. Is this them acting and falling in love, or is this them actually falling in love? I very much enjoy this one. Again, this is very smutty. It's about porn stars, but I liked some of the conversations that are brought up in here about them having rights and consent, especially. where Debbie like doesn't always feel that way, and some of the abuse that might go on within the porn industry. And I very much enjoyed this one. Then we have her series written with Julie Murphy. This is the Christmas Notch, I think is what this series is called, like the overall like series name. Starting with this one, Merry Little Meet Cute. And anyway, so this is about, these are Christmas books. These are definitely rom-coms. This is about this porn star. She's a plus size porn star, and she's wanting to become a real actress, not just a porn actress. And she gets this deal to be in this Christmas movie with it's almost like the Hallmark Channel. I think it's called the Hope Channel or Hope Stories or something like that, which are made for TV Christmas movies. And so she's going to be acting in this series, and she doesn't want anybody to really know that she's actually a porn star. She wants to be taken seriously as a serious actor, and she is paired up with this guy who is a former boy band member who is just trying to find work again. He has kind of ruined his reputation a little bit, so he's trying to make some money to help support his family. And both of these characters end up falling in love with each other. Both of these characters had crushes on one another because he watches her porn and knows that she's a porn star. She's one of his favorite porn stars. And then she, as a teenager growing up, had posters of him, like pictures on his posters in her room, loved him as a boy band. So they get into fun little sexy shenanigans in this story. Then we have Snowplace Like LA, which is a male little novella romance. It's a second chance romance between the costume designer for like the set of this story and then the son of, I believe he's a producer maybe of this like movie that knows the female character because he's also a porn director. Anyway, it's his son and then the costume designer of this story get together. This one is another novella that I don't think is quite necessary to read. You don't have to read it. It wasn't my favorite. It was okay. There's a little bit of a miscommunication in it, which I didn't really care for, but it was still pretty good. And then I won't really be able to talk too much about this next one because it actually isn't out yet. That's going to be A Holly Jolly Ever After, which is the second book of this series. And it's going to be another filming a Christmas movie. We have an actress that was actually supposed to be the actress in this story. But she's now going to be the actress in this new movie, and it is another ex-boy band member of the same boy band that the hero from the first book was in. He's going to be the main lead in this one. So I'm very excited about it. That comes out in October, I think. I could be wrong with that. So I'm very excited about that. They haven't really announced if there's going to be more books in this series. Right now it's just set for 2, but I'm kind of anticipating that there's going to be a 3rd book in this series because the boy band, there were like 3 members, if I'm remembering correctly, in the boy band. So I'm kind of anticipating that there's going to be a 3rd book about the other boy band member. But that's just me speculating. There's nothing that's been officially announced that there's going to be another one. Okay, we're nearing the end of all of her books. Now we're getting to some of her standalones, starting with her like short story novella standalones that she has that you can get. So there is Sherwood, which is another throuple romance. This is a Robin Hood retelling, but Robin Hood is female, so this ends up being an FFM story. Robin of Locksley, she was in the military, and now she is kind of this like spy of sorts. She is being hunted down by the CIA because she has stolen secrets from the military that she is wanting to distribute. And then we have Mary, I think is her name. It starts with an M. She's kind of caught up in the middle of Robin, who's come back to town and is in love with her and wants her, and then this mysterious character that I can't remember his name, who is somewhat trying to use her to get to Robin and take her down. And then they all kind of like come together and form this like throuple kind of thing. And I really enjoyed this one more than I was anticipating enjoying it. Loved it. Then we have Sanguine, which is a male-male vampire romance. It is about a vampire and a vampire hunter, and the vampire hunter comes up to the vampire and says, hey, I want to stop being a vampire hunter because I really like you and I want to be in a relationship with you. Very good. Then we have Supplicant, which is a second chance romance between a professor and student. They were going to get married and then he left her at the altar. So then it is like 3 or 4 years later and they run into each other again and the sparks fly again. This one, I like this one. I didn't like it as much. I wish there was a little bit more groveling from the hero and I would have liked it, I think, a little bit better, but I still very much enjoyed this one. And then if you can, kind of hard to see with like my lighting, but then we have The Fae Queen's Captive by Simone. She wrote this as part of a Kickstarter with Katie Robert. These 6 different authors got together to write these stories for the Peculiar Tastes series. So she wrote this one. This is a sapphic romance. This is a fantasy romance where one of our characters is on this excavation in England and she gets taken by fairies and then taken to the realm of the Fae, and she is brought to the queen to become the queen's toy. This is very good. I very much enjoyed it. This is one of her only other books that is in KU. So definitely check this one out. And then last but not least of her standalones, we get to her stories that she did for the Misadventures series, which I very much enjoy this series. It's a series of many different authors that wrote little short books in this series. So she wrote Misadventures of a Curvy Girl. This ends up becoming another MMF throuple romance, although we don't have a ton of male scenes in this one. This is about this girl. She is going to this like small rural town in Kansas for part of her job. I think she is a photographer. But her car breaks down and she is rescued by this hunky cowboy kind of character and taken in, and he's very attracted to her. She's a curvy girl. She's a plus size character, and finds out that his roommate also is very attracted to her. So she ends up getting with both of them. So very much enjoyed this one. Then we have Misadventures with a Professor. This is a professor-student type romance, although the student is more of a grad student. She's a teeny bit older, and she is going to England to become the assistant to this professor, but she hasn't met him yet. So her first day in England, she decides she's a virgin and she wants to lose her virginity, and she's just tired of being a virgin. So she goes up to this man that she doesn't know, ends up having a one-night stand with him, and then when she gets to the place where the professor actually is, realizes that it's the professor that she's supposed to be working with. And I love this one. And then finally we get to Misadventures in Blue. This is a cop romance. This is an older woman, younger man romance. The older woman, she is a detective, and she is known kind of like the ice queen of the precinct. And you find out that that's because her fiance, who is also a cop, died in the line of duty. And then we have this younger, like, rookie cop who is working with her on these cases, and he just thinks that she is very sexy, very attracted to her, and is determined to start breaking down some of her walls. And it's very sexy, and I really much enjoyed this one too. So those are all of her works, at least the works that you can like buy physical copies of or that are out there. You cannot buy a physical copy as of yet of Snow Place Like LA. They might. I'm kind of anticipating that they might put that out there to buy a physical copy of, but they haven't yet. But yeah, so some overarching themes of Sierra Simone's work, just things to kind of know going into her stories. Not all of these are going to be in all of her stories, but they are going to be in most of her stories. So number one, BDSM. And along with that, like steam in general. All of her works are very spicy, pretty high on the spice scale. She is much more like what I would consider an erotic romance author. So she doesn't write straight erotica. There is definitely plot. There's definitely a romance to her stories, but there's lots of steamy, spicy scenes that help along the plot, and they help along the character development. But yes, just knowing going into that, you're not going to get these like middle of the road, little bit of steam. They're very high steam. I'm pretty sure in the new Camelot series, there's some steamy scenes that span like multiple chapters, like 30 pages or more. It is very drawn out, and it's not like it's, oh, another steamy scene after another. Like there's purpose to the steamy scenes. So BDSM is prevalent throughout pretty well all of her stories. There are some where it's much more well known than others. So some of her stories, it just may be more that one of the characters likes to be more controlling or a little bit more dominant in the bedroom, but they don't actually come out and say, hey, I'm a dom and I want you to be my submissive. It's not there. That's just like little snippets. But then there are some stories like in New Camelot where it is strictly said, I am a dominant, you are submissive. There are rules. They talk about safe words, especially in just reading Salt Kiss. They talk about safe words. They go over like lists, like here is my hard limits. These are some of my soft limits. They definitely like fully dive into the BDSM realm, or especially more on the S&M side. So sadism and masochism, like in Lesson of Thorns. Poe is and I always get these mixed up. I believe she's a masochist? Sadist? I can't remember. I always get them mixed up. But she gets off on pain. She, like, when we get into the series, she has had dominance in the past, but she is still a virgin. She's never actually had sex with any of these dominants. She is doing it specifically as she needs the pain to get off and to almost like de-stress. So some of their stories get definitely more into that realm of it. Another kind of overarching theme or element is bisexuality. I believe Sierra Simone has come out and said that she is bisexual. So many, if not all of her characters in the stories are bisexual. A lot of times they don't actually come out right and say that they're bisexual, but many of her stories, especially in the Thorn Chapel series, all of these characters in this series are bisexual. They like both men and women. Another element is going to be Catholicism. So like the priest series. He is a Catholic priest. So I know this is where I've seen, especially on Facebook, where people are like recommending these series and they're like, oh, I couldn't get into this because I didn't like all the talk about religion. So Sierra Simone, I think she writes in this one actually that she grew up Catholic but is no longer Catholic, but she still has a lot of respect for the Catholic, what did she say? Like religion, for the church. She has still a lot of respect for it, even though she is no longer Catholic. So she does have lots of elements of, she might quote like scripture. Many of her characters are Catholic. So like Catholic priest, or in New Camelot, they are Catholic and they get married at a Catholic church. So I definitely can understand why some readers don't like that. Like me, I am not religious. I would consider myself agnostic, but I am a very spiritual person, so I can appreciate how she words some of the things. Like her characters are spiritual, and especially in the priest series, I think it adds to this element that there's this extra like angst and emotion to the story because he is a Catholic priest, but he is wanting things like sexual things that he thinks is wrong based on his faith, and trying to combat those feelings and his guilt that he is feeling, like the dichotomy of what in his heart he knows that he needs this. He needs to be with Poppy. He loves this woman, but that the religion that he's under says he shouldn't, and that is wrong. Like, so what is right? And I think how she writes, talking about religion, especially Catholic religion, is very moving and beautiful. So I really like it, even though I am not. Like, to me, it doesn't feel like she is pushing that on me, like this religion on me. This is just part of her characters, and they are very much within this faith. And I don't know. I really like that, but I understand why people don't like that. Another theme that is prevalent throughout some of her stories is kingship, and the like being a leader and the burden of that. So that's most especially prevalent in her, like, I would call her 3 main Sierraverse series. So New Camelot with Ash. He's the president, but he is a very kingly character, kind of because he's based off of King Arthur. And he's just, I freaking love Ash. He is just this good person. He really, truly wants to do the right thing, but he has all this burden of all these people that are under him and who he has to look out for, the entire American people. But then he's also the king to Greer and Embry. He is their king, and he is kind of keeping them together. Same with in Thornchapel series, Auden. There, within the rituals that they're doing, there has to be a Thorn King that kind of presides over the rituals and starts them. And by the end, with the door that appears, the king is supposed to be the one that closes this door. Only the king can close this door. So he has this weight on him of what is he supposed to do to keep the friend group together, to save everybody, and whatnot. And then we get that again in Lyonese. Mark is the king of Liney's, of his BDSM club. It is his domain that he resides over, and it is said that he has this chair at the club that he sits in. He's very kingly. So that is a recurring theme. Another one is sacrifice. There is one, she talks about it with sacrifice because it pops up within Catholicism, within the Catholic Church, you know, making these sacrifices to God. But then we also have that a lot in, especially kind of tying into the whole kingship like theme, these kings, you know, making these sacrifices for the greater good, or to save people, or to keep their like relationship group together, making these big sacrifices. So and I don't know if this is like kind of a theme, but it's definitely an overarching like element to her stories. They are very emotional stories. Very emotional, very angsty. If you want a good angst kind of stories, read the books in her Sierraverse world. So, like the emotional. So this series, especially in any of my wrap-ups that I've done where I've talked about this series, you know, it is very emotional stories, and not just like sad or like happy, but I did cry with this series, so there is that. But it's these characters, you know, when they're this like throuple kind of relationship, they're in love with each other, you know, at like Greer, she's in love with Ash, but she's also in love with Embry. And when Ash sees Greer and Embry together, he has all of these emotions. It's very like, I would say very realistic for human emotions. You're not just feeling one emotion. You could be just feeling one emotion at one time, but normally we're feeling lots of different emotions. So when he sees Greer and Embry together, he is feeling definitely jealousy. He is feeling possessive of both of these people, and they should be his. But then when he sees them together, he's also like very turned on by them together. He's very lustful towards them. He loves both of them, but then he's also just, he hates that they're together. And it's just this big cloud of emotional angsty mess, and I love it. That's part of the reason why I love her stories. I love the absolute depth of her characters that she writes. They have many flaws. They are feeling all these different feelings, and they're very just real characters. There's lots of emotion to her stories. There are layers to her stories. So with, again, I use this as a prime example because this is, New Camelot is probably, the New Camelot might be my favorite of her works. I love it. Like love it. But because we get Greer's point of view first, and then we get Embry's, we start diving down the layers of the story. It's not just this story of, you know, this president who's in love with his wife and then also his vice president. There are so many layers and depth to all of her stories. Her writing is also just absolutely beautiful. And yeah, I love her so much. So now we get to, where should you start with all of her books? You can see I have all of her books, which I have some of them like down by me so that I can like hold them up, but I have all of her books here. Very large backlist, not as large as some, granted, but still very large. So where should you start? So I think that kind of depends on what kind of reader you are. So if you're the kind of reader, you aren't as much into like the angst and the emotion, you like kind of a steamy story, you're more of like a contemporary romance reader, maybe even like a more like traditionally published like romance reader, if I were you, I would probably actually start with one of either her standalones or her co-written stories. So probably one of her misadventure stories is where I would start off with. I think they're a very good, like, dip your toe in kind of stories, just to kind of see a little bit of her writing style and see if it's for you, but without getting into like the big BDSM, Catholicism, like all of these big overarching elements that she has in her stories and all of the angst. So I think the Misadventure series was good, or even her rom-com with Julie Murphy. I think this is a really fun story. It's got those very big steamy elements, but then it's also hilarious and funny. It's very well written. So I think this is another good place to start. However, if you are here for the angst, you are ready to start and fully dive into like the full crux of a Sierra Simone book, I would start with going through her actual like core Sierraverse series. I would probably start with, if I can find it, I would start with her pre-series. That's really where I would start, because this is a pretty good idea of her writing style with her religious Catholicism elements. There's a little bit of the BDSM, there's emotion, there's angst. You get a good snippet of everything. Then I would probably move on to American Queen. And then honestly, after American Queen, I would move on to Salt Kiss after that. And then if you're tired, like you want to read a full series that's complete, because like I said, this series is not yet complete. If you don't want to wait for Salt Kiss to finish, then I would move on to Thorn Chapel. And I say that because New Camelot and Lionese are more directly related than Thorn Chapel, even though Thorn Chapel is also kind of related to both of these series. It's just they're kind of across the pond, whereas these are like really taking place here in America and are like more directly related. So that's where I would go. If you have questions about how to read her stories or where to start, or if you think Sierra Simone is the right author for you to try out, please leave comments down below. But yes, I love her so much, and I have the utmost faith in her. She is one of my auto-buy authors. I will always love this author, and I will always support this author. And I just want more readers to enjoy her as much as I do. But yeah, so that is actually going to be the end of this very, very, very long video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Like I said, if you have questions for me, or if you love Sierra Simone and just want to gush about her, please leave a comment down below. I really appreciate it. And otherwise, I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.